Welcome to another edition of Whiskey, Games, and Nerd Stuff. Today's whiskey, we are continuing to enjoy the Swear Jar whiskey. Swear Jar. Tastes so good, we dare you not to swear. Let's go ahead and take a sip. Definitely enjoying this more and more as I drink it. And then today's Nerd Stuff is, I'm going to just kind of talk about an article that I read in the April 20th issue of the Economist. I have several articles in here that I found a little interesting and been points of conversation with friends and family. And this is one in particular that I thought I would jump on, highlighted stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and say this at the beginning. Not saying anything in here is my particular opinion, nor am I trying to trigger anybody or get into arguments back and forth. This is just something I thought was interesting, thought it would be a good dialogue, and would like to see what people have to say about this. And if you want to read more, again, this is the full article. It's called "The Homelessness Sleeping Rough." And it starts off and asks the question, is ticketing homeless people a cruel and unusual punishment? The article starts off and it talks about how in 2013, local leaders in Grants Pass, Oregon, were talking about how to handle the vagrancy problem, as they called it. And I guess a record of that meeting states that participants suggested driving repeat offenders out of town and leaving them there, and buying homeless people a bus ticket to anywhere else. The point being, if they make it uncomfortable enough for homeless people, they'll go somewhere else. I'm caught between two sides of, the one side of me, it was reminding me of a South Park episode where Cartman and the boys are singing and get the homeless people to go to Santa Monica. Then I was also remembering the episode where they did something similar to hippies, if I remember correctly. And then the other side of is, rather than trying to find a way to get them out of those towns, why isn't there more conversations about the actual cause of the homelessness, the actual cause of what's going on, which this article gets into later. And again, not knowing your particular, if you're coming from the left, right, middle, or whatever, I can see points of this article that are going to cause issues on both sides, where people are going to, take offense to something in this article. The other part of this was talked about how one of the cities was trying to ban sleeping and camping in public places, thinking, well, if they were banning sleeping and camping in public places, then that would get rid of the vagrancy problem. And of course, that's not going to work. There talks about how they were woken by police, he recalls, slapped with fines they couldn't pay, and thrown in jail. I had a conversation with a friend who actually worked at a homeless shelter years ago, and they said that they knew some people that would intentionally get intoxicated, so they would get thrown in jail for public intoxication, because then at least they know they would have a warm bed and some meals, especially in winter in certain states. So, it's one of those things where some people might, and I'm fortunate enough to not have been in that position, and hopefully you're fortunate enough not to be in that position where you actually want to get thrown in jail so you can have food and shelter. It was interesting, and this is an article that I didn't know about, or a case I didn't know about. It says on April 22nd, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in Grant Pass versus Johnson. The question at heart of the case is whether penalizing homeless people for sleeping outside when they have nowhere else to go counts as cruel and unusual punishment, which is banned by the 8th Amendment. So I think, and again, I'm not a lawyer by any means, it's my understanding of just briefly looking up this particular case is, hey, you can't ticket people and throw them in jail if they have nowhere else to go. Then it kind of talks about another case that in 1962, the Supreme Court found in Robinson versus California that a Golden State law making drug addiction illegal rather than the use, purchase, or sell the drugs was unconstitutional. So they were saying that you can't criminalize a status. You can't criminalize being a drug addict. You can, however, criminalize, punish, fine, and incarcerate for buying, soliciting, and possession. So I didn't even know that was something where this state or other states would have passed. But the law criminalizes status rather than an act, and even 1 day in prison would be cruel and unusual punishment for the crime of having a common cold, which is what the court said. Then it kind of goes into talks about the Ninth Circuit Court. In Martin versus Boise, the court held that the city of Boise could not penalize people for sleeping rough when no shelter was available to them, as in such situations ran afoul of the Eighth Amendment. Let me go ahead and take another sip. So it's interesting to see where everybody's trying to use different language, to talk about the homeless situation, whether it's vagrancy, sleeping rough, camping out in public. It's almost like they don't want to talk about the issue. Then what I found was interesting here, it talks about how Western politicians are hoping the court's ruling will offer clarity on how to tackle the proliferation of tent encampments. Half of the growth in America's homeless population between 2020 and 2023 came from the 9 Western states that comprised the Ninth Circuit. More than a quarter of them came from California alone. Then it kind of goes on to talk about different cities and whatnot. It says sweeping or breaking up encampments is allowable so long as cities aren't ticketing homeless people who have no other shelter. So they're saying that it's legal to sweep and break up the encampments. You just can't You can't ticket them if they have nowhere else to go. Let's go ahead and take another sip. And then this is kind of where I thought it also got interesting as well. In 2022, a federal judge interpreted the Boise and Johnson rulings broadly and blocked San Francisco from clearing encampments where there is no other shelter available. Politicians have another reason to blame the courts. It's easier to whine about judges than to shoulder the blame themselves for failed policies. Then it kind of talks about how as recently as the early part of the COVID-19 pandemic, Democrats were leery of sweeping away encampments. The liberal mayors around the West are now trumpeting their attempts to eradicate them in testimony to how they feel fed up with their voters and the homelessness in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Portland. Tents have become to symbolize disorder and failed policies. No wonder politicians hope to stay in office want them gone. Let me go ahead and take a drink. So what I'm getting from this, and again, this is what I'm getting from the article, is that there were mayors and various politicians who didn't want to sweep away these encampments for a variety of reasons, but now they're kind of hoping that those get swept away because they become to symbolize disorder and failed policies. What I find frustrating, and I would imagine a lot of other people would find frustrating, is there seems to be so much talk and focus on how it looks and not enough focus on why. What is the cause? And I know it's not going to be the same in every state. I know that, your homeless population and the demographics and the reasons in California may not match those in Arizona, which may not match those in different parts of the country. Obviously there's going to be some your common factors. You're going to, people are unemployed. There's usually their drug addiction. You have veterans. You have people from other demographics as well. This is one that I kind of find interesting where, rather than focusing on the blight and how it looks and the encampments, where's the focus on, okay, what can we do to help people out of the circumstance? What can we do to, give people, a hand up, not a hand out? I have to imagine that, and again, I can only imagine this, if I'm in a situation where I'm homeless, I'm in a tent encampment, it gets knocked down, all my stuff gets thrown away. That didn't really help my situation, right? Whatever I managed to save, whatever clothes I had, whatever money I had, I would imagine is getting thrown away in those encampments. So there's got to be a better way to do this. And I by no means have any solutions to this. This was just something that I was reading in this issue, the Economist. I found the article interesting. I read it a couple times. I didn't even know this was a thing where they were ticketing homeless people. I never heard of these particular court cases. I do know from, what I've watched in various news on cable news, you see pictures and you hear the talking heads on the various news channels discussing this, but, depending on what you're watching, you're getting I feel like you're getting a tailored view from an agenda, a specific agenda or a specific school of thought or political agenda. This is something where I think it's that, I highly encourage you to read and educate yourself about this particular issue. I would love to hear some comments and some thoughts on this particular article, or what you've seen done in your state, what programs you've seen work, what you haven't seen work, and what you would like to see done. I would just ask that everybody be respectful. Don't want to have a hostile discussion back and forth like you see in some spots. This is just a general question that I'm asking as I read this. This isn't in line with the other videos I do, except when I get in, I read something and I talk about a random article or a book. Again, do appreciate all the comments and support. If you like this stuff, please feel to subscribe. If you would like to see more of the article discussions in here, about things I read that I find interesting, please let me know and I'll post some as well. I typically read a magazine every other day. I've got thousands of magazines that I've read that I've highlighted different things in articles that I can talk about in addition to all the whiskey, games, and nerd stuff. Again, appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, and until next time, cheers.